Hello everyone, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Now, get comfortable. It's time to dive into the story Zombie Outbreak in Georgia, Surviving America's Zombie Collapse. Now, let's get started. The cabin's walls groaned softly in the night wind, the sound blending with the low hiss of the shortwave receiver on my desk. I'd been scanning the bands for hours, the dial gliding under my fingertips, each stop offering nothing but static or the ghost of a signal too faint to catch. The air inside smelled of gun oil and cedar smoke, the familiar sense of my self-imposed exile. Out here, miles from the nearest paved road, the world's noise rarely reached me. That was the point. But tonight, the static felt different. Restless, like it was carrying something just out of reach. I paused on a frequency where the hiss thinned, replaced by a faint, wavering tone. Then through the distortion, a voice emerged. Urgency. Outbreak confirmed. Georgia sector. I leaned closer, adjusting the gain until the words sharpened. The speaker's tone was measured at first, the kind of calm you hear from someone reading a script. But as the transmission continued, the cadence faltered. Containment compromised. Repeat, compromised. If you are receiving this, a burst of static swallowed the rest. When the voice returned, it was faster, urgent. Do not approach urban centers. Infection rate. Another crackle, then silence. I sat back, the receiver's hum filling the void. My pulse had quickened, though I'd trained myself not to react to rumors or half-heard warnings. Still, there was something in that voice, the shift from control to fear, that cut through my practiced detachment. I tried the frequency again. Nothing. Just the endless hiss. Outside the forest was a black wall beyond the cabin windows. My floodlights pin kicked out the first few yards of snow-dusted ground. Then nothing. Somewhere out there the world was changing and I was sitting in a box of wood and steel pretending I could keep it out. I glanced at the maps pinned above the desk. Georgia was a long way from here, but not far enough if whatever this was spread the way most bad things do, fast and without warning. The smart move was to stay put. I had food, water, ammunition. I'd built this place to be a fortress against exactly this kind of chaos. But the voice wouldn't leave me. The way it broke on that last word, the way the static seemed to close in as if the airwaves themselves were being swallowed. I shut off the receiver. The sudden silence was heavier than the noise had been. By the time I stood, I'd already made the decision. Isolation had kept me alive this long, but if the world was burning, I needed to see the flames for myself. Tomorrow, I'd head out. The morning broke without bird song. No chatter from the treetops. No insect hum rising with the light. Just the low idle of my truck as I eased it down the dirt track toward the highway. Frost clung to the grass, brittle under the tires, and the air had that hollow stillness that makes you feel like the last person alive. The two-lane road to town was empty at first. The asphalt cracked and silvered with frost. Then the first abandoned car appeared. A sedan skewed across the shoulder, driver's door hanging open. A mile later, there were more. By the time I reached the main highway, the lanes were choked with them. Some were neatly parked, as if their owners had stepped away for a moment. Others sat at odd angles, doors ajar, hazard lights still blinking in slow, dying rhythm. A delivery truck lay on its side in the median, its cargo door torn open, cardboard boxes spilling into the weeds. I threaded the truck between them, tires crunching over shat glass. The silence pressed harder here. The absence of even a single crow or stray dog making the world feel staged like a set abandoned mid-scene. The radio on my dash stayed mute. The emergency channels nothing but static. I kept glancing at the tree, half expecting movement, but the pines stood motionless, their shadows long and cold. 10 miles out, the road straightened. That's when I saw it. A figure stood dead center in the lane ahead, maybe 100 yards away. Too far to make out details, but close enough to see it wasn't swaying or shifting its weight, just still. I slowed, the engine's growl, dropping to a low rumble. The figure didn't react. My hands tightened on the wheel. 50 yards. The shape resolved into a man or something shaped like one. Clothes hanging loose, head tilted slightly to one side. His arms dangled at his sides, fingers curled. 30 yard. The man's head snapped upright, the motion sharp enough to make my stomach clench. Then, without warning, he bolted, not toward me, but sideways. Vanishing into the tree and with a speed that didn't match his slack posture a moment before. I brake hard, scanning the trees. Nothing moved now. The pines swallowed him whole. For a long moment, I sat there, the truck idling, breath loud in my ears. The road ahead was clear, but it felt like crossing an invisible line. I pressed the accelerator. The truck rolled forward, tires whispering over the cold asphalt, carrying me deeper into the silence. The truck rolled past the faded "Welcome to Fairview" sign, its paint peeling in long curls, the cheerful slogan beneath, "A place to call home," half obscured by grime. Main Street stretched ahead in a straight line, flanked by two-story brick buildings whose windows stared blankly down at me. The air was still, the kind of stillness that feels deliberate, like the town was holding its breath. I slowed to a crawl, scanning for movement. Storefronts gaped open, some with doors hanging from broken hinges, others yawning wide as if they'd been abandoned. One midday. The wind moved through them in low sighs, carrying the faint smell of dust, old paper, and something metallic beneath. The scent of places left too long without people. A newspaper tumbled across the street, its pages flapping weakly before catching on the bumper of a rust-streaked sedan. The headline was smeared, but one word stood out in bold black. Quarantine. I parked in front of the grocery store. Its automatic doors were stuck open. One panel jammed halfway, the other shuddering in the wind. Inside, the fluorescent lights still hummed, casting a pale, almost sickly glow over aisles that were half-stocked. The air was cool, stale, and faintly sour. The smell of produce gone soft. Carts stood abandoned mid-aisle, some with items still in them, a box of cereal, a carton of eggs, a child's stuffed rabbit slumped against a loaf of bread. The refrigeration unit still ran, their low drone filling the silence. Somewhere deeper in the store, a single bulb flickered. Its stutter echoing faintly off the tiled floor. I moved slowly, my boots squeaking on the linoleum. The shelves told a story. Canned goods picked over, bottled water gone, but snack foods and condiments left behind. People had taken what they thought they'd need to survive, not what they'd want to taste. Near the back, a door marked "Employees Only," stood ajar. Beyond it, the stock room was dim, lit only by a single bulb swinging gently from a chain. On a metal shelf, a small radio crackled, its antenna bent. The voice that came through was flat, mechanical, repeating the same message over and over. This is an emergency evacuation order for all residents of Fulton, Dalb, and surrounding counties. Proceed immediately to designated safe zones. Avoid contact with individuals exhibiting erratic or aggressive behavior. This message will repeat. The loop clicked back to the beginning. The same calm tone, the same words. I stood there listening through 3 full cycles as if the repetition might change something. It didn't. I turned the volume down and the silence rushed back in like water filling a void. Back in the main aisles, I noticed details I had missed before. A trail of scuffed footprints leading toward the exit. A smear of something dark along the edge of a freezer door. The faint impression of a handprint on the glass. Outside the street was still empty. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that made the back of my throat tighten. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the boards creaking under my weight. Across the street, a diner's neon sign flickered weakly, the word "open," stuttering in and out of existence. Through the window, the booze sat empty, plates of half-eaten food still on the tables. A coffee cup lay on its side, a dark stain spreading across the counter. Farther down, the post office door banged softly in the wind, its hinges squealing. A stack of undelivered mail spilled across the threshold, envelopes fluttering like pale leaves. I took a few steps toward the truck, intending to move on, when a sound cut through the stillness. A crash, sharp and heavy from somewhere up the street. I froze, every muscle tightening. The sound didn't come again, but the air felt different now, charged, as if the town itself had just remembered I was here. I scanned the rooftops, the alleys, the darkened windows. Nothing moved, but the feeling of it being watched settled over me like a weight. I slid the rifle from its rack in the truck and stepped into the street, boots crunching on scattered glass. The wind had died completely now, the silence so deep I could hear my own pulse. The crash could have been anything. Debris falling, a door slamming in the wind. But in a place like this, with the world already fraying at the edges, it was safer to assume it wasn't an accident. I reached the intersection and paused, listening. Somewhere beyond the next block, something shifted, a faint scrape, like a shoe dragging across pavement. I tightened my grip on the rifle. Whatever was out there, I was about to find out. The crash echoed down Main Street, sharp enough to slice through the stillness. I moved toward it, rifle low, boots crunching over scattered glass. The sound had come from somewhere beyond the intersection, where the buildings leaned closer together, and the light thinned into shadow. I kept to the sidewalk, hugging the fronts of the shops. The air smelled faintly of rust, and something sour like meat left too long in the sun. As I neared the corner, a faint, wet, dragging sound reached me. Slow, deliberate, and horribly out of place. Peering around the brick edge, I saw them. Two figures hunched over a third, their movements jerky, but purposeful. The body between them was limp, heels scraping the pavement as they hauled it toward the mouth of an alley. Even from here, I could see the unnatural angles of their limbs, the way their heads twitched in short insect-like bursts. One of them paused, nostrils flaring. Its head turned toward me with a speed that made my stomach knot. The other followed, both sets of eyes locking on mine. They dropped the body. I stepped back, heart hammering, but they were already moving. Not shambling, not stumbling, but running. I bolted, boots pounding the pavement, the sound of their pursuit snapping at my heels. The alley ahead was narrow, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes. I darted into it, weaving between obstacles, the stench of rot thickening with every step. A metal trash can clanged behind me as one of them clipped it, the noise ricocheting off the brick walls. I risked a glance back too close. Their mouths were open now, teeth bared, breath rasping in short animal bursts. The alley spat me out into a side street. I vaulted a low fence into a yard choked with weeds, the boards flexing under my weight. Behind me, the fence rattled violently as they hit it. One scrambling over while the other veered toward a gap in the boards. I cut through another alley, this one tighter, the walls closing in until I could feel the rough brick scrape my sleeve. A fire escape ladder hung low. I grabbed it, swung myself up 2 rungs, then dropped back down on the far side of a chain-link fence, using the momentum to keep moving. Their footsteps never faltered. The street ahead was lined with shuttered shops, their signs faded and swinging in the wind. I scanned for cover for anywhere with a door I could bar. That's when I saw it. A hardware store. Its front windows dusty but intact. The door still in its frame. I sprinted for it. Lungs burning. The first infected hit the sidewalk behind me. Its shadow stretching long in the late light. I reached the door, yanked it open, and stumbled inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and machine oil. I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt, the metal clunk echoing in the dim. Outside, footsteps skidded to a stop. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the first shadow fell across the glass. It pressed closer, the outline of a face flattening against the pane. Another joined it, then another, until the light outside was fractured by their shapes. They didn't pound or shout. They just stood there watching, their breath fogging the glass in slow, steady bursts. I backed deeper into the store, the floorboards creaking under my weight. Rows of shelves loomed in the gloom, stacked with tools and supplies. Somewhere in the back, a loose shutter banged softly in the wind. The shadows outside didn't move. Not yet. The road out of town narrowed as it approached the river. The buildings thinning until only skeletal billboards and rusted guard rails flanked the asphalt. The sun was sinking low, bleeding orange into the water ahead. I could see the bridge from half a mile out. A long stretch of steel and concrete spanning the wide, slow-moving river. For a moment, I thought it was clear. Then the glint of metal caught my eye. As I drew closer, the shapes resolved into military vehicles. 2 Humvees angled across the far end of the bridge, their armored bodies blocking both lanes. A third sat sideways, its front wheels hanging over the edge as if it had been shoved there. The crews were nowhere in sight. I slowed the truck, the tires humming against the worn asphalt. The bridge loomed ahead, its steel trusses casting long shadows that crisscrossed the deck like a cage. The river below reflected the dying light in broken shards. The surface rippling in slow, lazy patterns. But the ripples weren't all from the current. Something moved beneath. At first it was subtle, a darker shape sliding under the water, keeping pace with the bridge. Then another joined it, and another, their outlines distorted by the shifting surface. They were large, too large to be fish, and their movement was deliberate, not the aimless drift of debris. I eased the truck forward onto the bridge, the hollow thud of the tires on expansion joints echoing into the stillness. The air felt heavier here, the kind of weight that presses against your skin. My eyes kept flicking between the road ahead and the water below. Halfway across, I stopped. The Humvees at the far end were close enough now that I could see the details. Doors hanging open, windshield spiderwebbed with cracks, one hood smeared with something dark and dried. Bullet casings glittered in the gaps between the concrete slabs. I stepped out of the truck, rifle in hand. The bridge vibrated faintly under my boots, though the wind was barely moving. I walked toward the railing, peering down into the water. The shapes were closer now. I could make out the pale suggestion of limbs moving just beneath the surface. The way they angled upward before sliding back down into the depths. One passed directly under me and I caught a flash of something that might have been a face. Too long, too still, eyes open and unblinking. A shiver ran through me. I turned back toward the truck, intending to reverse off the bridge and find another route, when a sound stopped me. A faint metallic clink from the far end. I froze, scanning the Humvees. Nothing moved. Then the water broke. It happened fast. A surge of spray, a pale shape erupting upward, arms flailing for purchase on the bridge's side. The thing hauled itself halfway out of the river in one smooth motion, its skin slick and mottled, its mouth opening in a soundless snarl. Another shape surfaced beside it, then another, their hands slapping against the concrete, nails scraping for grip. The bridge's faint vibration deepened into a steady tremor. I backed toward the truck, heart pounding. The Humvees ahead were still the only barrier between me and the far bank, but now they felt less like protection and more like a trap. The first creature swung a leg over the railing, its movements jerky but strong. Water streamed from its clothes, or what was left of them, pooling dark on the deck. Its head turned toward me, and even at this distance, I could see the milky film over its eyes. I climbed into the truck, slamming the door, the engine roared to life, the sound startling in the heavy air. I threw it into reverse, tires squealing as I backed toward the townside. More shapes were climbing now, their bodies hitting the deck with wet thuds. One dropped to all fours, scuttling toward me with unnatural speed. Another rose to its full height, head cocking in that too smooth arc I'd seen before. The truck jolted as I hit an expansion joint, the steering wheel jerking in my hands. I risked a glance in the side mirror. They were following, their feet slapping against the concrete, water spraying from each step. The far end of the bridge was lost to me now, blocked by the growing swarm. The only way was back. As I neared the end, one of the shapes broke from the pack, sprinting along the railing before leaping onto the truck's bed. The impact rocked the chassis, the rear suspension groaning. I swerved, trying to shake it off, but its hands gripped the frame like iron. I slammed the brakes. The creature pitched forward, slamming into the cab's rear window with a dull crack. I hit the accelerator before it could recover, the sudden lurch sending it tumbling back onto the deck. The bridge's shadow fell away as I reached solid ground again. I didn't stop until the truck was 100 yards from the river, the engine idling hard, my breath loud in the cab. In the rear-view mirror, I saw them clustered at the bridge's edge, watching. One stepped forward, placing a hand on the railing, its head tilting as if memorizing me. The river below them rippled again. More shapes were rising. And I knew the Beans Ridge wouldn't hold them for long. The forest swallowed the road within minutes, the truck's headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the pines. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see shapes breaking from the treein, but the only movement was the restless sway of branches in the wind. The bridge was behind me now, but the image of those pale forms climbing from the river clung to my mind like smoke. The road narrowed to a root track, pine needles muffling the tires. I killed the headlights, letting the moonlight guide me. The air was sharp with resin and cold earth until another scent cut through. Acrid and unmistakable smoke. It thickened as I drove, curling into the cab through the vents. A faint orange glow flickered ahead, pulsing between the tree. I slowed, coasting forward until the forest opened into a clearing. The homestead sat in the center, a squat two-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch. Flames licked up one side, devouring the wooden siding, sparks spiraling into the night. The fire's roar was a living thing, its heat pressing against my skin even from here. I was about to throw the truck into reverse when movement caught my eye. Figures in the windows. Not the jerky silhouettes I'd come to dread, but frantic, purposeful shapes. I stepped out, rifle ready. "Anyone alive in there?" a woman's voice answered, hoarse but strong. "Help us, please." She appeared at the front door, coughing through the smoke. Two children clung to her legs, eyes wide and wet. Behind them, a man staggered into view, one arm hanging uselessly at his side. I sprinted forward, the heat intensifying with every step. The porch boards groaned under my boots. "Back inside," I shouted. "The roof's about to go. We can't." "The back's blocked," the woman coughed. A sharp crack split the air as a window on the second floor burst, showering glass onto the porch. The fire was climbing fast. Feeding on the dry pine boards. Then from the tree came another sound, low at first, then multiplying. The guttural uneven chorus I had heard before. The infected were coming. Their shapes emerged between the trees, drawn by the light and noise. Dozens of them moving with that awful unbroken intent. Inside now, I herded the woman and children back through the doorway, the injured man stumbling after. The interior was worse. Smoke pooling along the ceiling, the air thick and hot. I could hear the fire chewing through the walls, the timbers groaning under the strain. "We go out the side," I said, scanning for an exit. The kitchen window was half open, the glass already warm to the touch. I shoved it higher and motioned the kids through first. The woman followed, then the man, gritting his teeth as I hauled him over the sill. Outside, the night was fractured. Firelight on one side, the dark press of the forest on the other. The infected were closer now, their pale faces catching the glow as they closed in. "Run for the trees," I ordered. "Stay low." We plunged into the pines, the ground soft with needles. Behind us, the homestead's windows blew out in a rush of heat, the flames roaring higher, the light painted the trunks in violent orange, casting our shadows long and frantic. The first of the infected hit the clearing, their bodies jerking as they spotted us. They gave chase immediately, their footfalls erratic but fast. We weaved between the trees, the smoke following like a living thing. Embers drifted through the branches, stinging where they landed on skin. The injured man stumbled, nearly going down, but I caught him under the good arm and kept him moving. A shape lunged from the side, one of the taller ones, its limbs too long, its head snapping toward me. I swung the rifle stock into its jaw, the impact jarring up my arm. It reeled back, but another was already there, fingers grazing my sleeve before I shoved it away. The woman had pulled the children ahead, their small forms darting between the trunks. I shouted for them to keep going, my voice ragged in the smoke. We broke into a narrow gully, the ground dropping steeply. I half-dragged the injured man down the slope, sliding on loose soil. The others followed, the infected crashing through the undergrowth behind us. At the bottom, a fallen pine lay across the gully floor. We scrambled over it, the bark slick under our hands. One of the children slipped, but the woman caught him, hauling him up with a strength born of terror. The infected were seconds behind. I turned, firing a short burst into the nearest shapes. 2 went down, thrashing, but the rest kept coming, their eyes fixed and unblinking. "Move!" I shouted, vaulting the log after the others. The gully curved, leading us deeper into the forest. The fire's glow faded behind us, replaced by the cold silver of moonlight. The sounds of pursuit didn't fade. If anything, they grew sharper in the cooler air. We reached a thicket dense enough to slow anything larger than a child. I pushed the kids through first, then the woman. The injured man groaned as I shoved him after, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I followed last, branches clawing at my jacket. On the far side, the ground leveled into a small clearing. The air here was clearer, the smoke trailing above us instead of choking the space. The woman collapsed to her knees, pulling the children close. The man leaned against a tree, his face pale, sweat cutting tracks through the soot. I scanned the tree line. The infected hadn't broken through yet, but their sit moved in the shadows, circling. "They're not giving up," I said. The woman looked up, eyes wide. "Where do we go?" I didn't have an answer. The forest stretched in every direction, dark and endless. But staying here meant being surrounded. I pointed toward a narrow deer trail leading deeper into the pines. "That way we keep moving until they stop following or until we find somewhere they can't reach." The man pushed off the tree, wincing. "And if there's nowhere like that," I chambered another round, the sound loud in the stillness. "Then we make one." We set off again, the trail winding away from the fire's dying glow. Behind us, the infected's calls rose and fell. A chorus that promised they were still on our scent. The forest closed around us, the pines whispering overhead. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped. Not from the wind. We didn't look back. The trail to my cabin was little more than a deer path winding through dense pine and oak. I had chosen it for that reason. No one stumbled on it by accident. The truck's tires crunched over the packed earth, headlights sweeping across the familiar rise of the hill where my home sat like a crouched animal in the dark. The cabin's silhouette emerged between the trees, squat, low-roofed, ringed by a double fence of chain link and sharpened stakes. Beyond that, the ground sloped away into a tangle of undergrowth and rock. Every approach was a funnel. Every funnel a kill zone. The woman and her 2 children were silent in the back seat. The injured man slumped against the door. Lena sat beside me, eyes scanning the tree. She'd been here before, once years ago, when the world was still intact. Back then she'd called it paranoid. Now she called it hope. We rolled through the outer gate, the hinges groaning. I killed the engine and listened. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no night insects. Just the faint creak of the fence as it settled under its own weight. "Inside," I said, helping the injured man down. The kids clung to their mother, eyes wide at the sight of the cabin's reinforced door. The steel shutters bolted over the windows. Inside, the air was warm from the banked fire in the hearth. The smell of pine resin and gun oil wrapped around me like an old coat. I moved quickly, checking the perimeter cameras on the small monitor in the corner. 4 feeds, each grainy but clear enough to show the fence lines and the approaches. For a while there was nothing. We ate in silence, canned stew heated on the wood stove, water from the rain barrels. The injured man dozed in a chair, his arm bound in a makeshift sling. The children curled up on the couch, their mother sitting close enough to touch them if they stirred. Then just after full dark, the first shape appeared on the north camera. It stood just beyond the outer fence, head tilted, watching. The infrared made its eyes glow pale. A second shape joined it. Then a third moving with that same unnatural stillness. "They found us," Lena murmured. I was already moving, checking the traps. The outer fence was rigged with trip wires and noisemakers. Old cans strung with nails, lengths of chain that would rattle if disturbed. Beyond that, I'd set puny pits and spike boards, all hidden under leaves. The first rattle came from the east side. The monitor showed a figure tangled in the wire, thrashing. Another moved in to help it, and both went down when the spike board flipped up under their weight. The noise brought more. Shapes emerged from the tree and I. In 2s and 3s, their movements quickening as they closed on the fence. The cameras caught flashes of pale skin, the glint of teeth. I grabbed the rifle and a box of flares. "Lena, keep them away from the south side." "That's our weak point," she nodded, already loading shells into the pump action. The first real impact came minutes later, a body slamming into the chain link hard enough to make the posts shudder. The fence held, but the sound was like a dinner bell. More came, hurling themselves against the metal, clawing at the mesh, fired a flare high over the north fence. It burst in a bloom of red light, washing the clearing in blood-colored glow. The infected shrieked, some flinching back, others surging forward as if the light itself was prey. The traps worked for a while. Spike boards claimed a halfozen, the pits, another 3. But for every one that fell, 2 more appeared from the dark, the air filled with the metallic stink of blood and the high keening cries of the horde. Inside the children whimpered. The woman tried to hush them, but the sound carried. I saw one of the infected pause, head cocking toward the cabin, and my stomach tightened. The east fence began to bow under the weight. I fired through the mesh, the rifle's report cracking the night. Figures dropped, but the press didn't ease. They climbed over their fallen, hands hooking into the chain link, feet scrabbling for purchase. Lena's shotgun roared from the south side, each blast lighting her face in brief, fierce flashes. "They're testing it," she shouted. I moved to her side. The south fence was lower, built over rocky ground where digging traps had been harder. The infected seemed to sense it. They came in waves, hurling themselves at the mesh, clawing at the stakes. We fought them back, round after round, the air thick with gun smoke and the acrid tang of burning powder. My shoulder ached from the recoil, my ears ringing. Still they came. A scream cut through the den. "Hi, human." I spun toward the cabin. One of the children was at the window, the shutter half open. A pale arm shot through the gap, fingers clawing for purchase. The woman yanked the child back, slamming the shutter closed as I put a round through the arm. It jerked away, vanishing into the dark. The north camera flickered, then went black. I swore under my breath. Without eyes on that side, we were blind. "Fall back to the porch," I called. We retreated in steps, firing, reloading, firing again. The porch was our last defensive ring. Waist-high barricades of timber and steel firing slits cut into the walls. From here we could cover all approaches, but if they breached the fence in force, it would be close quarters. The infected hit the outer fence harder now, their shrieks rising. The chain link groaned, posts bending. I saw one of the taller ones leap, catching the top rail and hauling itself over. It landed inside the perimeter, sprinting for the cabin. I dropped it with 2 shots, but more were following. The fence was failing. Lena slammed a fresh shell into the shotgun. We can't hold if they get through in numbers. I know. The east side gave first, the posts tore free of the ground, the mesh sagging under the weight of bodies. They poured through the gap, tripping over the traps, but rising again. Relentless, we fired until the barrels smoked, until the ground between the fence and the porch was slick with bodies. Still they came, climbing over their dead, eyes fixed on the cabin. Then the north side went. The sound was like a tree snapping. A sharp crack followed by the metallic scream of tearing mesh. The horde surged through a tide of pale limbs and open mouths. The outer fence collapsed in sections, the stakes snapping under the press. The traps were gone, the clear ground gone. All that was left was the porch, the barricades, and the thin walls of the cabin behind us. I met Lena's eyes over the gun barrels. We both knew what came next. Inside, I said. The survivors scrambled through the door, the woman clutching her children, the injured man limping hard. Lena backed in last, firing one final shot before slamming the door. The cabin shuddered as the first bodies hit the walls. The siege had truly begun. The cabin's walls shook with each impact, dust sifting from the rafters. The outer fence was gone, and the porch barricades wouldn't hold for long. The pounding on the door had a rhythm now, not random, but relentless, like the tide. This way, I shouted over the noise, grabbing the lantern from its hook. I led them to the kitchen where a trap door was hidden beneath a worn rug. The hinges groaned as I pulled it open, releasing a breath of cool, damp air from below. The woman herded her children to the opening, their eyes wide in the flickering light. Lena helped the injured man down the narrow ladder, his boots scraping the rungs. The smell of earth and old wood rose up, mingling with the acrid tang of smoke from the hearth above. I went last, pulling the trap door shut over my head. The pounding above became muffled, replaced by the close, heavy silence of the cellar. The lantern's glow revealed rows of shelves stacked with jars, pickled vegetables, preserves, dried meat. The walls were rough stone beaded with moisture. A narrow passage yawned at the far end, framed by timbers darkened with age. "This leads to the old tunnels," I said, keeping my voice low. "They run under the ridge. We can put distance between us and the cabin before they even realize we're gone." The woman clutched her children, nodding. The injured man leaned against the wall, his breath ragged but steady. Lena took point, her shotgun angled low as we moved into the passage. The air grew cooler as we went, the scent of damp earth thickening. The tunnel floor was packed dirt, uneven underfoot. Roots dangled from the ceiling, brushing our shoulders. Somewhere above, the muffled thud of bodies against the cabin walls continued. A grim reminder of what waited if we turned back. We passed through the first chamber, a larger root cellar, its shelves long empty, the air stale. Beyond it, the tunnel narrowed again, forcing us into single file. The lantern's light barely reached the walls, leaving the edges in shadow. That's when I heard it. A faint scuff ahead of us. Not the dragging shuffle of the infected, but something lighter, more cautious. I raised a hand and the group froze. The sound came again. A footstep, then another, followed by the faint rasp of breath. "Who's there?" I called softly, my voice carrying just far enough to be heard. Silence. Then from the darkness ahead, a figure emerged into the edge of the lantern's glow. He was gaunt, his clothes hanging loose on his frame, hair matted and strewn with dirt. His eyes blinked rapidly against the light, one hand raised to shield them, the other clutched a length of pipe, the end wrapped in cloth. "Don't come any closer," he rasped, his voice cracked from disuse. "We're not infected," I said, keeping my tone even. "We're just trying to get clear of the cabin. You've been down here long." His gaze flicked over the group, the woman, the children, Lena with her shotgun before settling back on me. Weeks, he said, finally lost track of how many. Been living off what I could find in the cellars. Thought I was the only one left. The woman stepped forward slightly. There's a horde above. We can't go back that way. Do these tunnels lead out? He nodded slowly. There's an exit maybe half a mile. Comes up in an old quarry, but it's not safe. Things come through sometimes. Things? Yelena asked. He didn't answer. Just glanced over his shoulder into the dark behind him. I made the decision. We'll take our chances. You can come with us or stay here. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he lowered the pipe and stepped into the light. Name's Harris, he said. We move together now. Harris leading. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder. Water dripped somewhere ahead. The sound echoing off the stone. The lantern's flame guttered in a stray draft, making the shadows dance along the walls. At one point, the passage widened into a cavern where the ceiling arched high above. Old crates were stacked against one wall, their wood soft with rot. Harris paused there, listening. Sometimes they nest here, he whispered. We crossed quickly, the sound of our footsteps swallowed by the damp air. On the far side, the tunnel narrowed again, the walls closing in until my shoulders brushed the stone. The children began to tire, their steps slowing. The woman murmured encouragement, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Finally, a faint glimmer appeared ahead. Not the warm flicker of the lantern, but the cold silvery light of the moon. That's it, Harris said. The quarry. We emerged into the open, the night air sharp and clean after the closeness of the tunnels. The quarry floor stretched out before us, a wide bowl of pale stone under the stars. For a moment it was quiet. Then from somewhere in the shadows along the rim came the sound of movement. Harris's grip tightened on his pipe. Told you, he murmured. We weren't alone. The quarry's pale stone walls fell away behind us as we climbed the ridge and found the old service road. It wound upward through the pines before spilling us onto the cracked ribbon of Interstate 85. The asphalt stretched in both directions, empty and silent. The faded lane markers leading into a horizon washed in gray. We moved cautiously, Harris scouting ahead with his pipe in hand, Lena covering our rear. The woman kept the children close, their small hands gripping her coat. The injured man limped, but kept pace, jaw clenched against the pain. The air was still, heavy with the scent of old exhaust and sun-baked rubber. The first sign of the convoy came in the form of a single Humvee. Its hood crumpled, windshield starred with bullet impacts. The doors hung open, the seats inside dark with long dried stains. A few yards beyond, another vehicle sat sideways across the lanes, its tires shredded, the metal pocked with shrapnel scars. Then the rest came into view. A dozen military trucks stretched across both lanes. Some jackknifed, others nose-to-tail as if they'd been trying to push through. Canvas covers hung in tatters flapping weakly in the breeze. Crates lay spilled across the asphalt, their contents scattered, ration packs, empty ammo boxes, helmets lying on their sides like discarded shells. We approached slowly, the silence oppressive. No birds, no insects, no distant hum of engines, just the faint creak of metal cooling in the late afternoon air. I climbed into the nearest truck, the metal steps groaning under my weight. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with the faint, sour smell of sweat and oil. Maps were spread across the dash, held in place by a combat knife driven into the wood. I pulled one free, unfolding it across my knee. Red ink slashed across the country in thick, uneven lines. Entire states were shaded in, marked with the word contained. Others were crossed out entirely, the names barely visible beneath the scroll. Georgia was the only state left unmarked. Lena joined me, her eyes scanning the map. If this is accurate. She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. Harris leaned in, his face pale. Contained doesn't mean safe. It means burned. I folded the map, tucking it into my pack. Either way, with the last sector standing, and if the bridge was any sign, it won't stand for long. We moved through the rest of the convoy, searching for supplies. Most of the crates were empty, but we found a few boxes of ammunition, a half-full jerry can of fuel, and a medical kit with enough bandages to rewrap the injured man's arm. The children stayed close to their mother, their eyes darting to every shadow. The trucks loomed over them like silent giants, their hulks casting long, cold shadows across the cracked pavement. At the far end of the convoy, we found the command vehicle, a larger truck with reinforced panels and a bank of radios inside. The equipment was dead, the batteries long drained, but the log book lay open on the passenger seat. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago. The handwriting was hurried, the lines uneven. Convoy stalled. Orders to hold position until air support arrives. No contact from HQ in 48 hours. Supplies low. Morale worse. Movement in the Trian at night. Not infected. Watching. I closed the book. The weight of the words settling in my chest. We regrouped at the center of the convoy. The sun dipping lower. Shadows stretching long across the asphalt. The air had cooled, but the stillness remained thick and unnatural. "We can't stay here," Lena said. If they were watching this convoy, they might still be out there. She was right. The tree line pressed close on both sides, dark and dense. Every so often, I thought I saw a flicker of movement between the trunks, but it was gone before I could be sure. We loaded what we could into the truck we'd taken from the quarry road. The engine coughed but caught the sound loud in the silence. As we pulled away, I glanced in the mirror. The convoy sat frozen in the dying light, a monument to a last stand that never came. The maps in my pack felt heavier than they should have. The red lines burned into my mind. Georgia was the last unburned sector and we were running out of road. The interstate stretched ahead in a long fractured ribbon, the city skyline etched against a bruised horizon. We'd been making steady progress since leaving the convoy, the truck's engine humming low, the road eerily clear. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the clouds above were thin and high, the light already beginning to fade toward evening. The overpass rose ahead, a concrete span crossing above our route, its guard rails rust-streaked, the pillars below tagged with faded graffiti. I slowed instinctively. Overpasses were choke points, blind from below. You couldn't see what waited up there until you were already under it. Lena noticed my hesitation. "You think it's blocked or worse?" I said, eyes scanning the shadowed underside. We rolled into the overpass's shadow, the light dimming for a moment. The sound changed, too. The hum of the engine echoing back at us. The tires hiss on the asphalt swallowed by the hollow space. That's when I heard it. A faint scrape above, then another. I looked up through the windshield just in time to see the first one drop. It hit the hood hard enough to dent the metal, its hands slapping against the glass. Its face was inches from mine, mouth open in a silent snarl, eyes clouded and unblinking. I swerved, the truck fishtailing as Lena shouted. 2 more dropped into the bed, their weight rocking the chassis. The children screamed from the back seat, the woman pulling them close. Harris swung his pipe wildly out the window, catching one in the ribs, but it clung on, nails screeching against the metal. I slammed the brakes. The one on the hood slid forward, tumbling onto the asphalt. One in the bed lost its grip and rolled off into the lane. The other leapt, landing on the roof with a hollow thunk. Then they came from both sides. Figures poured down the embankment, sprinting toward us, their movements jerky but fast. Above more leaned over the guardrail, their heads tilting in that unnatural way before they dropped. "Out!" I shouted. "Move!" We spilled from the truck, weapons up. The infected hit the ground around us, some rolling to their feet, others crawling forward on all fours. The air filled with the sound of boots on asphalt, the rasp of breath, the wet slap of hands and feet. Lena fired the shotgun, the blast echoing off the concrete. One went down, but another was already in its place. Harris swung his pipe, the metal ringing against bone. I fired twice, the recoil jarring my shoulder, each shot buying a seconds. The fight spilled across the lanes, the truck now a pivot point in the chaos. The injured man stayed close to the woman and children, swinging a tire iron with his good arm. The smell of sweat, blood, and old rot thickened in the air. One of the taller infected vaulted the hood, landing between me and Lena. Its head snapped toward her, and I saw the intent in its movement. Not random hunger, but targeted. I stepped in, driving the rifle stock into its jaw. Bone cracked, but it kept coming until Lena's second shot took it down. More were dropping from the overpass, their bodies hitting the asphalt with sickening thuds. The sound was relentless, like heavy rain on a tin roof. "We can't hold here," Lena shouted over the den. She was right. For every one we dropped, two more appeared. The truck was boxed in the lanes ahead and behind, clogged with bodies. Toward the city, I pointed to the skyline, its dark shapes rising beyond the overpass. On foot, we formed a rough wedge, pushing forward through the swarm. Harris took point with me, his pipe swinging in brutal arcs. Lena guarded the rear, her shotgun booming in steady rhythm. The woman kept the children between us, her face set in grim determination. The infected pressed from all sides, their hands clawing at clothes, weapons, skin. One grabbed my sleeve, its grip like iron. I tore free the fabric ripping and drove my boot into its chest, sending it sprawling. We broke through the densest knot, sprinting into the open stretch beyond the overpass. The city loomed closer now, its towers catching the last light of day. Behind us, the swarm followed, their cries rising in a chorus that carried on the wind. The asphalt stretched ahead, empty for the moment. My lungs burned, my legs heavy, but we didn't slow. The overpass receded behind us, the infected spilling down its sides like water over a dam. We'd left the truck, the supplies, the little shelter it offered, but we were still moving. And in this world, movement was survival. The skyline drew us on, its dark shapes promising nothing but the next fight. Atlanta rose before us like the skeleton of a giant, its skyline jagged against the smoke-stained sky. Fires burned in pockets across the city, their orange glow pulsing through the haze. The air was thick with the smell of ash and something far older. The sour tang of decay that clung to every street. We moved in tight formation, keeping to the shadows between gutted buildings. Storefronts stood hollow, their windows shattered, shelves stripped bare. Cars lay abandoned at odd angles, doors hanging open, their interiors picked clean. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, long, mournful, and without urgency, as if it had been crying for days. Lena took point, her shotgun angled low, eyes scanning every alley. Harris followed, pipe in hand, his shoulders tense. The woman kept the children close, their small hands gripping her coat. I brought up the rear, rifle ready, ears tuned to the city's fractured heartbeat. We avoided the main roads, slipping instead through narrow side streets where the shadows were deeper. Twice we froze as roaming packs passed, infected, moving in loose clusters, their heads twitching, their movements erratic. They didn't speak, didn't moan, just moved with that awful, unbroken intent, their feet dragging through the debris. The first time we pressed ourselves into the doorway of a burned-out cafe, the smell of charred wood masking our scent. The second we ducked into an alley so narrow the bricks scraped our shoulders, holding our breath as the pack shuffled past the mouth. The city was a maze of ruin. Whole blocks had been gutted by fire, their skeletal frames leaning into each other like drunks. Smoke curled from manholes, carrying the faint echo of movement. Below, somewhere far off, a single gunshot cracked, then silence swallowed it whole. We crossed Peachtree Street under the cover of a collapsed billboard, its rusted frame groaning in the wind. The children moved quickly, their eyes wide but silent. They'd learned the cost of noise. The closer we drew to the CDC, the more the city seemed to hollow out. The packs thinned, replaced by a heavier stillness. It wasn't safety. It was the kind of quiet that comes when predators have already fed. We passed a bus jackknifed across an intersection, its windows smeared from the inside. A single shoe lay in the gutter, its laces trailing in the dust. Finally, the CDC building came into view. Even in ruin, it was unmistakable. A broad glass-fronted structure that had once been a fortress of science and order. Now its facade was cracked, whole panels missing, the jagged edges catching the dying light. The plaza before it was littered with debris, overturned benches, shattered planters, the twisted remains of a security gate. We stopped at the edge of the plaza, scanning for movement. The glass reflected the fire light from the city, but nothing stirred inside. "That's it," Lena murmured. The woman tightened her grip on the children. Harris shifted his weight, eyes on the darkened entrance. I studied the building, the way the shadows pulled in the gaps where glass had once been. It looked dead, but so had plenty of places before they came alive with teeth and claws. "We move fast," I said. "Once we're inside, we find a defensible spot. No wandering." No one argued. We stepped into the open, our footsteps crunching over broken glass. The sound seemed too loud, bouncing off the empty walls. The CDC loomed over us, its dark windows watching like blind eyes. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. A faint metallic groan like a door swinging on tired hinges. We didn't slow. The streets had brought us here. Whatever waited inside would decide if we stayed. The CDC's interior was a hollow shell of what it once had been. Corridors lined with overturned gurneys, papers scattered like fallen leaves, the air heavy with the scent of dust, and something faintly metallic. Our footsteps echoed too loudly as we moved deeper past darkened labs and shattered glass offices. In the central communications room, a faint green light blinked on a console. Against all odds, one transmitter still had power. I crossed the room, brushing debris from the controls, the panel hummed under my fingers, the static in the headset clearing as I adjusted the dials. "This is anyone," I began, my voice rough from days of smoke and silence. "If you can hear me, avoid Georgia. The infection is everywhere. Containment has failed. There are no safe zones here, only the dead and those about to join them." The others stood in the doorway, listening. Lena's face was set. Harris's eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the hall. I kept speaking, forcing the words out. "If you're south of the Corollas, turn back. If you're already in the state, God help you. Move at night. Stay off the roads and trust no one you don't know." A sound carried through the building, faint at first, then growing. The scrape of something heavy against tile. The wet slap of bare feet. I tightened my grip on the mic. "We tried to hold. We failed. This is the last warning you'll get." The first impact rattled the door frame. Lena swung it shut, throwing the bolt, but the metal shuddered under the next blow. Harris raised his pipe, his jaw clenched. I spoke into the mic one last time. "If you're hearing this, well, don't come here. Don't." The door burst inward, the frame splintering. Pale shapes poured through, their eyes catching the dim light. Lena fired, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. Harris swung, the pipe ringing against bone. Hands closed on my shoulder, yanking me back from the console. The mic slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor. The last thing it caught was the chaos. Gunfire, shouting the guttural cries of the infected before a final sharp crack as it hit the tile. Then only static. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams.